Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Buffalo-style pizza. That's right, I will eventually explain what makes a pizza Buffalo-style. But before I start doing that, let me tell you what doesn't make it a Buffalo-style pizza. And that would be Frank's hot sauce, or chicken, or blue cheese, or celery. Okay, this is simply the style of pizza that they apparently enjoy in Buffalo, New York. And I say apparently because I don't think I've ever actually had it. But I've heard great things, and I've always wanted to try it. And thanks to many minutes of extensive research, I think I got it pretty close. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by making our Buffalo-style pizza sauce, which we'll begin by placing a saucepan over medium-high heat, into which we'll drizzle a little bit of olive oil, followed by 1 can of tomato paste. Okay, the first characteristic of Buffalo-style pizza is apparently the sauce is made out of tomato paste and not fresh tomatoes or canned plum tomatoes like most pizza sauces. And then to that, we're supposed to add some garlic powder, as well as some onion powder. And yes, maybe fresh garlic and fresh onion would taste better, but we don't want it to taste better. We want it to taste like pizza in Buffalo, New York. And then after that, we will add some red pepper flakes, as well as some dried basil and some dried oregano. And then we'll also go ahead and toss in some salt, as well as the second most important ingredient next to the paste, and that would be a couple spoons of sugar. Since from all accounts, a Buffalo-style pizza sauce has to be sweet, or at least sweeter than your typical pizza sauce. And then what we'll do once everything's in there is go ahead and toast this tomato paste and other ingredients in that olive oil for a few minutes until it sort of starts to caramelize onto the bottom of the pan, creating what nobody in Buffalo calls a fond. And once we have sauteed our tomato paste mixture for a few minutes, and it hopefully looks a little something like this, we will stir in a couple cups of cold fresh water, and we will patiently wait for this to come up to a simmer. And no, a silicone spoonula does not do a great job of stirring tomato paste into water. So as it started simmering, I went ahead and switched to a whisk, and I made sure my mixture was nice and smooth. And once our sauce is simmering, what we'll do is back the heat down to medium, and we will reduce that down until it thickens up. Alright, not super thick. Alright, most of the great pizzas I've seen made in my life have been done using a relatively thin sauce. Since don't forget, that stuff's got to cook in a hot oven, and it's going to reduce and thicken as it bakes. So for me, this thickness right here is just about perfect. And no, despite the name, you are not allowed to put any Frank's hot sauce in there. Well, actually, I'm mostly kidding, since you can put in whatever you want. I mean, you are, after all, the Jim Kelly of what goes in your belly. But again, this has absolutely nothing to do with Buffalo-style chicken wings. And that's it. Other than maybe checking for seasoning, our Buffalo-style pizza sauce is done, and we can simply turn off the heat and let it cool down before we use it. And once that's set, we can move on to panning up our dough, which we will be pressing out and stretching to fill this very well olive-oiled, standard half-sheet pan. And besides the pan, we'll want to make sure we keep our fingers oiled as well. And as luck would have it, exactly 1 batch of our Detroit pizza dough will fit one of these sheet pans perfectly. And speaking of sheet pans, make sure you use a heavy-duty professional one. Right, one of those thin, flimsy cookie sheets is not going to work very well here. And then let me give you a huge tip for stretching this dough. Because this dough is fairly elastic, you're only going to be able to push and stretch it out to a certain size before it just starts pulling back and won't go any further. So what we'll do once that happens is simply stop and let the dough rest and relax for 5 minutes, at which point we can resume the stretching, the pulling, and the pushing. And it's been my experience that like 2 restings is enough, but you'll know because the dough will let you know. And besides the fact that this Detroit pizza dough works out perfectly size-wise and will give us the exact thickness that we want, which, by the way, for a Buffalo-style pizza is not thin or thick. It's like somewhere in the middle. But the other reason this works so well is because Buffalo-style pizza crust is supposed to be fairly light and airy, and actually some people even refer to it as focaccia-like, which happily are pretty much the same characteristics of a Detroit pizza crust. But no matter what pizza dough you're using, we do eventually want to stretch it into the corners. And again, that was made possible by letting this rest twice. And that's it. Once our dough's been put in the pan, like a real Buffalo Bills fan, we'll go ahead and spread over our now cooled sauce. Although as you can maybe see by the steam coming off it, I didn't exactly let mine cool down all the way. But do as I say and not as I did. And besides not putting too much on, and getting it spread nice and evenly, another characteristic of Buffalo pizza is that the sauce goes all the way to the edge of the crust. There will not, shall not, cannot be any naked crust. According to my sources at least, embedded deep inside the Buffalo pizza subculture. And other than that huge bare spot I just made, that is looking pretty good. And then once that's set, we can go ahead and apply our cheese in the way of way too much mozzarella. All right, another signature characteristic is a lot of cheese. So believe it or not, for a half sheet pan, we're actually going to scatter over a pound of mozzarella. Oh, and make sure you're using that very firm, low moisture variety, and not that wet, fresh stuff. And in the spirit of full disclosure, the hunk of mozzarella I was working with was 14 ounces. So I didn't quite use the full amount called for. So let's just say we're going to put down between 14 and 16 ounces of cheese. And again, just like the sauce, we want to go all the way to the edge. And then once our pizza has been cheesed, we will go ahead and place down our pepperoni, which is hopefully not this large, thin kind I have to use. Okay, maybe the most iconic characteristic of this pizza is what they call cup and char pepperoni, which means as it bakes in the hot oven, the slices kind of curl up and form a cup, and then the top edges get nicely charred and black, which only happens if you use a thickly sliced, smaller round of pepperoni, which for some reason they do not sell in California, or at least I can't find it. So if you can get the thicker, smaller stuff, please use it, and you will get a much more authentic look. Although having said that, I did get partial cupping and charring, which was nice. And as you can see, we're going for almost, but not quite full coverage. And then one last trick before this goes in the oven. What I like to do is very carefully place this over a high flame and sort of move it around all over so that bottom crust gets a little head start. Since one of the problems cooking a giant pizza on one of these sheet pans is that sometimes that crust underneath gets undercooked. Right, there's nothing sadder than an undercooked underbrown crust. I mean, not like lose 4 straight Super Bowls sad, but still pretty sad. So I like to give that about a minute over the flame until I can hear that olive oil starting to sizzle. At which point it's now ready to transfer into the lower center of a 500-degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes, or until our cheese is beautifully browned, and hopefully our pepperoni have cupped and charred, which I did have happen on a couple of these slices. And yes, I did cook this to what we call in the pizza business well done, which was mostly to try to get that pepperoni to char. But also, I really do like nicely caramelized cheese. So I went ahead and transferred that onto a cutting board, and then went ahead and sliced it up with my pizza wheel. And if you want that to be a little trickier, make sure you use an odd number of rows and columns of pepperoni. Alright, mine was 7 by 5, which means we have to cut through pepperoni, instead of cutting between pepperoni, which is always easier and looks nicer. But anyway, as mildly annoying as that was, I quickly moved on to the part where I get to take a bite. And yes, thanks to our nice hot oven, and that putting it over the flame trick, our bottom is beautifully cooked. And that, my friends, truly was a great piece of pizza. Okay, we have that light, airy, tender, almost focaccia-like crust, topped with that somewhat sweet, but because we used paste, intensely tomato-flavored sauce. And then what looked like a ton of mozzarella ended up being the perfect amount, with everything being topped off with that beautifully caramelized pepperoni. And of course, now I'm tempted to get some of that proper buffalo pepperoni mail-ordered, so I can taste how big of a difference that really makes. But anyway, that's it. My first and probably not last attempt at buffalo-style pizza. What this lacks in Frank's hot sauce and chicken and blue cheese and celery, it more than makes up for by being a really great pepperoni pizza. And I might add, since it doesn't include those things, it is perfect to serve alongside buffalo-style chicken wings. You know, like at a Super Bowl party or something similar. But no matter what you serve it with, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.